This is willpower.
Well, we're so excited. Thank you so much for having us.
Of course. Thank you so much for being here, Juliet and Kelly Starrett. Amazing. I have a long history with you, and I have a long history with you in the sense that you don't know I have a long history with you, but I consistently have done 30-day challenges and work with women specifically one-on-one over the course of the year, and then clients in the breath and cold space that are male and female, performance training, athletes, etc. And unbeknownst to you, I have always, for the last, 3-4+ years, since you were differently named, sent people to the Ready State as a place to understand how to use mobilization and mobility, because I really, really believe in it. I've been through like a 30-day challenge you guys did. And so I'm so familiar with your work and in that regard. And I'm stoked to be able to have shared it with so many people, because the challenge as a coach, as you both know, is there's a lot of shit and information out in the world. And somebody recently posted on Instagram this cute little quip about, I can prove that coffee will make me go blind, and I can prove that coffee will help my eyesight. Like, you can kind of look up anything in the world around the research and literature space and find proof points. So having you both here to talk not just about mobility, but to talk about the new book.
You know, what's interesting that you picked up is Juliet and I owned a gym for a long time together. 17 years of coaching people. And one of the things that we set out to do with our virtual product, with the Ready State app, is actually plug a hole for coaches. Because, you know, one of the things no one talks about is that there's a finite amount of time you can talk to someone or work with someone. And you have to build a problem list and a hierarchy of things you want to work on. And it's impossible to meet someone's needs in 3 hours a week. It's impossible. You can set them up and point, but if you could create safe, bona fide resources, right, that are vetted, that show their work and their proof of concept, then you can just offload that. And Juliet and I have been doing that forever ourselves. You know, when we were like, oh, we like this resource, and, you know, go chase this down on your own time. So if we can solve that problem a little bit for coaches, that's a real win. In fact, oftentimes, you know, I feel like I'm speaking to coaches and, you know, teachers in the work that we're doing, because we feel like for example, the way we work with professional athletes and teams, we work less on one-on-one with athletes, and we work a lot more with their coaching staff, because that's where we can see real change.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's beautiful. Not to like lean right into the whole like sales pitch on it, but the truth is it's really beautiful. And I think I have a philosophy, like, it's rising tide lifts all boats. And even, you know, especially when you and I met, Kelly, at the biohacking conference, it's you never know what you're going to get when you meet people in the industry, because I know so many incredible people, and even meeting you, it really fortified this understanding that you get to meet people that you really look up to. And then when they're down to earth and grounded, as I'm sure that you both have heard that in the past before, but you never know. And there's definitely times I've met people and there's sort of this like weird competitive edge to the conversation, or dismissiveness about sharing too much information. And I don't believe in that. A lot of the work I do is as an aggregator. And there are people like you in the world that could I go, and I'm sure I could study with you and do things for 10 years and get to a point where I could make some of my own videos and share them with my clients. But if I'm going to aggregate the best of the best, why wouldn't I go to people like you to share with my audience? And so if there's coaches and other people listening to this, you know, it's wonderful to be able to have you as a resource and to work that into programs. My clients are happier. They get better faster, or they get, I just had a woman who was in a major car wreck, and like one of the first pieces of the tools, as soon as her PT work is wrapping up, is like, how do we get you some PEMF and how do we get you the Ready State so that your life can get back to some normalcy? So really beautiful point, really important point. What I would love is if we could, my audience will surely be familiar with a lot of your work and Supple Leopard and some of what you both are doing, but I'd love to be able to get just separately from you, because I think that's the most interesting part, is you probably are quite often rolled into one fantastical creature. But just, you're at a cocktail party and you're, you know, drinking a non-alcoholic, low ABV, organic, dynamic wine or something. You roll up, someone comes up to you and says, "Oh my goodness, I recognize you. I don't know a lot about what you do. Could you tell me about all the things that you do?" And, over a quick glass of wine.
Kelly and I always, anytime we get asked a question about what we do, we always are like, nod it, you go first. So I did a nod it first. So take it away, Kels.
I'm a physical therapist. Look, people are like, "Oh, I have shoulder pain." I'm great. Juliet and I came at this. We're accidental entrepreneurs, accidental business owners. I'm a physical therapist. I train classical training through a good PT program, et cetera, et cetera. Juliet is an attorney, and we both love to train. And Juliet is a world champion athlete. We met at the world championships in whitewater paddling. We have always been into, I don't even know, the word physical culture isn't right, but I think it's how we self-soothe.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we love to do together is train. We had, dueling memberships and we were broke, but we carved out enough to have our memberships at our local Club One health club. And we would, go there religiously before grad school and law school. And, we've been training together since 99, really 2000. And, that led us into when we sort of discovered CrossFit early on. I discovered it in 2003 and, became very curious because I suddenly discovered I wasn't very strong and I wasn't very fit, maybe 2004. And, Juliet and I were already creating this sort of aggregate of training. We ride our bikes and we go to the Club One and we do some cardio, and then we'd lift weights and deadlift. And then we'd, go to the racquetball court and throw the medicine ball around. And we were trying to put all these things together into a cogent whole. And we really struggled with that a little bit. Like, well, what are we going to give up here? How are we going to do this here? And all of a sudden we discovered we weren't very skilled. We weren't very fit. And when we sort of started to understand what CrossFit was saying, hey, look, you need to be competent at all of these movement skills. And we're going to just challenge your movement skills, not just with loading, but of course, across a whole bunch of other domains. Suddenly we discovered that, here's another way where we could train with our friends and compete. So ultimately we realized that we wanted to open a gym, and we opened the 21st CrossFit together. So this is the long way around the story of how that set us up to, we needed to solve a problem in our own lives, which is have a place to train and do the things we wanted to do. And I couldn't, I was driving to the South Bay to learn how to Olympic lift. And, I put a huge hole in the concrete of our house in the backyard because I dropped some weights and went through the concrete pad. It was okay because I had already sucked our neighbors into working out with us. So ultimately, when the gym started rolling, we realized that was going to be a gateway towards opening up a whole lot of opportunities. And that was our side hustle. And then when we moved the physical therapy business in there, because we saw that was going to be an opportunity to integrate, truly have the treatment table right next to the squat rack. And then lo and behold, we're starting to realize that we're seeing the world in a slightly different way. And we have a thing we want to teach, a model for helping people understand their bodies in the formal language of strength and conditioning, using strength and conditioning as a diagnostic tool and regression, progression. And then that leads to the next thing, So ultimately, Juliet and I are all about, you should be able to know how to self-soothe and take care of yourself. And the flip side to that coin, if the coin is spinning, the flip side to that coin is that when you do those things, you can go harder. And ultimately, what we've realized is that our two objective sort of measurements in our piece are, do you have full range of motion and as much access to movement freedom as you should have? And, can you go generate more wattage, more poundage, more force, and do it through a whole life? And what we've come to understand about ourselves is now we're having a different conversation as we both turned 50 this year. And that looks very different than when we were 27. And so that has set us up to solve the next problem for ourselves and our community, which is how do we talk about being durable and infinite? So really, ultimately, we want to teach people how to take care of their bodies because we feel like the world didn't set them up for that. And that usually means we need to teach you how to move and self-soothe.
So I'll tackle that a little bit as well, sort of working off of what Kelly said. I mean, I think that we are focused on a few things right now. The first, which you alluded to earlier, is we are launching our next book called Built to Move in April of 2023. So we are really looking forward to that. But, we've all said the word, aggregator a few times in this 20 minutes we've been talking to each other. But I really think that's how, that's what this book means to us, is it's our sort of aggregation of all the information we've learned being in the health and fitness space for almost 20 years or more than 20 years at this point. And even longer, because we were both professional athletes prior to that. And I was a D1 rower in college. So, this book is really about an aggregation of a lifetime of the practices that we think are clutch for people to be healthy and happy and feel good in their bodies. And I think the other sort of this is sort of a connected mission. But one of the challenges Kelly and I have is that we are accidental entrepreneurs. We do a lot of things really well, but one of the things we're not great at is selling stuff. That's actually, we're really out of our comfort zone there. And so one of the challenges we have when it comes to the Ready State is, letting people know that we actually have products we offer in the Ready State above and beyond, becoming our sort of well-known book, Becoming a Supple Leopard. That we've really tried to sort of take Kelly's brain and put it into this app that we call Virtual Mobility Coach, which we're renaming Supple Leopard, by the way. But, we have this really comprehensive app that we think can provide so much support and help in people learning how to take care of their bodies on their own. And so I think that's one of the big things we're working around right now is in this crazy world, as you know, where we are all getting fire hosed with health and fitness information. How do we make the case that, if you want to take care of your body and be able to move and do the things you want to do until you're old, you want to be doing the Ready State on the regular, and following our book Built to Move. I think those are kind of our big challenges right now. And then the only other thing I'd say is that, and this just is what it is, but Kelly's always known as the mobility guy. And that's always that's always a perception we're trying to blow up a little bit, because at the core of that is he and we are really the movement people, because the mobility piece was always a fix to be able to move. And so we've always been about movement, that really, if you ask anyone what they want to be able to do when they're 75 years old, literally 0 people will say, I'm hoping I'm stuck in my lazy boy and can't move around or do anything with my family. What everybody says when they think about their, 5, 10, 20, 25 year physical aspirations, it is 100% connected around the ability to be able to move in our environment. And so all of these stretches, mobilizations, range of motion exercises, whatever you want to call them, whatever makes sense to you, are all designed to help you be able to do whatever it is you want to do. And I mean, that's wide ranging. I mean, if you just want to be able to squat in your garden to be able to pick weeds, great. If you want to be able to, do a 24-hour mountain bike race when you're 65 years old, great. It doesn't matter what people's goals are. They need to be able to take care of their bodies to be able to move the way they want to. And so I think sometimes that sort of movement piece has gotten lost in the conversation around what it is we do. And we're hoping that our book called Built to Move will actually help reframe that a little bit as that's the goal. The goal is to be able to move the way you want to feel good while you're moving and to be able to do the things you want to do. And so I think, I'm not even sure we answered your question, but that's our focus right now.
What I'll say though is over the course of this venture, we really have nailed down what we think are essential movement vital signs. And that as we came out of the pandemic, people are good with SaO2 and heart rate and temperature and all the other things. But we're like, so how much should your hip be able to move? And they have no idea. And what should you be able to do with your body in a free way without just playing human Jenga with yourself? And people have no idea. And then when their knee hurts, or God forbid they ever have some low back pain, they catastrophize. Immediately, I need an MRI. I have back rabies. And we haven't done a good job, and the system is set up not to really serve people in this way because it is complicated. And ultimately, Juliet and I backed into having to be competent in speaking to nutrition and sleep and stress, because those are the environmental considerations that made you more durable or less effective at performance. And simultaneously, you can't just do those things and not move your body and load. And simultaneously, you should be able to bend your arm up all the way, and you should be able to put your arms up all the way over your head. And what Julia is saying is that no one has really owned that space and said, hey, this is a baseline. And even on the app, we're really proud. We think we have a first-in-class mobility test, a range of motion self-test, which is what it should be. You shouldn't go see a professional person for this. You should know if you're missing hip flexion or can't bring your knee to your chest. And you should have some simple tools to restore that, because that allows you to run more effectively, move more effectively, and you may even be able to go faster at the things you care about or be better at the things you care about.
Yeah.
So we just pinned you at the cocktail. We're both drinking a spicy margarita, by the way. That would be our default. And you now are running away screaming because we're two maniacs. Because that's we are sort of obsessed with this. We think about it all the time. We've suckered our kids into training with us. I mean, there's no way. There's no. This is what we do. Sorry.
No, you're not sorry. You know what I say to my women clients? They're not allowed to say, I'm sorry. They all have to say, if they say it, then they have to follow it up by saying, I'm sexy. So
I'm sorry, I'm sexy.
They're like, I'm sexy.
We're obsessed. I actually I'm trying to teach my daughters that too. It is weird how it becomes this default that women just default to saying, oh, sorry. And I noticed that, even we have two teenage daughters, and even they, because it's such a big part of female culture, that even they do it too. So I'm with you on that.
Yeah, for sure. And what I noticed, when I saw...
Your daughters are sexy. That's weird.
They are sexy.
But what I noticed, and I'm more and more very quickly noticed, just seeing you speak, Kelly, at the conference and really saying, okay, I'm coming to listen to this conversation, this talk, and not exactly knowing what I was going to get. And then being like, oh, damn, this is great. This is the landscape of action across, you called it environments, multiple environments in your life around health and wellness. And I think more and more we all need to be talking about that. But the big thing for me is I'm, whether you like the term or not, we can talk about this, but I speak a lot and work a lot. And some of my clients even call me their biohacking coach in the biohacking space. And what was fascinating to me is there was a couple conferences that called me and said, hey, can you come and speak on strength training? And so I laugh at that. Listen, I understand strength and conditioning. Yes, I'm a certified trainer. And my initial response is not one of imposter syndrome so much, because of course I'm going to go and I'm going to speak on fitness variance and strength training, all of that. But I felt like there's 4,000 more qualified people to come in and speak on strength training in many ways, right? Get you guys. And also someone's going to provide that opportunity for me to sit and talk. And I started to realize the reason they're asking me is because they think that I'm the expert in the biohacking community for strength and conditioning. And that is while I know a shit ton of stuff, and I've learned from people like you, and I've learned from like Deuce Gym when I showed up to Deuce, California. I don't know if you know Logan and the crew that's there from like the old CrossFit days, but I thought I train, I lift, I know what's going on. My training age isn't that bad. I know how to clean a barbell, and like, boy, was I wrong. Right. And so that's really fascinating. And I should not be, and this is not a slight on myself. I continue to learn. I'll take anyone on. I'll try anything. I'm autonomously taking care of my strength and conditioning. And we better start weaving in strength training to the biohacking space. It is talked about, but you probably, I want your commentary on that. But also, this is my big challenge. It's when I sit down with John Welborn, when I sit down with other people, I have a passion for that space. And then there is this whole other space of the biohacking world where I'm like, it's cool. Like, you could put red light on your balls and inject yourself with 42 things, or we don't have balls, I know, but do all the things that are like edgy or like cutting edge, bleeding edge. And also, if you can back squat a specific, 2 times your body weight, probably like 8 of the issues you're trying to solve would be solved. And so I don't know if I'm preaching to the choir, or if you feel like there is that. It's just what I hope to see more of. I mean, if you guys are feeling this in the landscape, and I think when I saw your talk, Kelly, and when I'm looking at the work that both of you are doing, it feels like, okay, hell yeah, this is the crossroads. right? I'm so on the team of like go biohackers. I'm on the team of like strength and conditioning, or like John Welborn said on the interview with him, he's like, biohacking, we've been fucking doing that for 10 years. It's called health optimization. It's called, strength and conditioning, biohacking.
I can totally hear you saying that. If you don't mind, I'll take this one. I'll start on this one. I'm sure Kelly will have thoughts. I think that I probably land in the exact same camp as you, where I have very mixed feelings about the word biohacking at this point. In fact, a few years ago, my name showed up on some list of like the top 20 female biohackers or something, one of those lists. And I have to say that I felt sort of like ambivalent about seeing that, because I thought, man, am I a biohacker? I think what I'll start by saying is I do think the biohacking community has done a lot of really cool things and have been really interesting innovators in the health and fitness space and done a lot of things that are really helpful and amazing. And I think what my challenge with the movement and the word, I think, is, and I think this is exactly what our book is about. So I hate to keep coming back to our book, but this is so relevant to our book, is that to me, all that complicated biohacking stuff is what you earn after you have checked the box on literally all the basics. And that what we have, and the phrase that Kelly and I like to use is, and we have these vital signs in our book, and we call the base camp practices. Like, you need to get to Everest base camp before you can climb Everest. And what I feel that's happening a lot in the biohacking community is people are climbing Everest in the form of supplements, injections, cold plunge. You name it. There's all these things people are doing, which are all great. But they're literally not doing the basics. And we all know what those things are, or at least we know some of them. For us, it's sleep, balance, breathing, movement, on the top 10, taking care of your body, making sure you have the range of motion to do the things you want to do. Like, to me, making sure you're exercising, put some muscle on your body, eat some vegetables, right? These are all the basics that we are talking about in our book that we think a lot of people, including elite athletes, are missing because they've sort of skipped the basics. And so, yes, I am a fan of biohacking for people who can say unequivocally, I have checked the boxes. I am doing all the basics religiously. They're habits in my life. And now I'm trying to optimize. And that's why I like the word John Welborn's used, is like, okay, great. Like, you have to earn the right to optimize, and you earn the right to optimize after you've literally checked every single box of doing the basics. But what we see a lot of people have jumped over base camp and they're at 24,000 feet on Everest, doing injections and sleeping on magnets and doing red light therapy and sitting in their infrared sauna. Again, all great if you've done the basics.
Yeah. Awesome. I second that, because I deal with this with breath work when I'm working with people. So now I'm just like, biohacking breath work. Let's figure out how to breathe like biohacker, whatever's going to like put the sauce on the meal to make it feel good. But I think that there's so many basics. Yeah.
So Juliet is right. And let me just start by saying we should define what we mean biohacking. Right. And clearly that movement came out of an idea that small hinges swing big doors, and that we could take advantage of a lot of technology and thinking and integrate it into our lives. Like so many other things, though, it absolutely can become an identity. I'm keto, I'm paleo, I'm carnivore, I'm CrossFit, I'm whatever it is, right? And it really does feel like I get to self-identify. I think we're all three wearing Oura rings. Is that possible, right? And take me to your leader. It turns out that Juliet and I, we shouldn't drink alcohol before we sleep. It turns out I had a coffee because I drove home from the mountains last night at 7. And guess what? Very little deep sleep last night. So weird. Why did I knew that going in, and I was like, Juliet, I look at my sleep score is crap. And I was like, it's almost like I had coffee at 7, and we discussed the impact of that on my sleep. So, the key here is, I think we want to really appreciate that all roads lead to Rome. And if drinking some butter in your coffee is the thing that began a life quest for you, where you became curious about your health and wellness and your movement so be it. I'm down. I really have evolved a little bit where I'm like, okay, it's cute that you think glutathione is the answer, right? Like it's okay. What we saw was people were generally not very healthy. And for Juliet and I, we like to say, and I think I even said this, and when we were in LA together, I was like, how's it going? Are we less fat? Are we less metabolically deranged? Are we less depressed? Are we less suicidal? Do we have fewer ACL injuries? We're like, choose something you care about in your community and your family, and then apply this filter. Better, same, worse. And what we have to see is, I think, this revolution in health and wellness, especially in the last 15 years, almost going back 20 years to its nascent start, is a reaction to people saying, I don't think this is working for me. And I feel like there is some personalized, actionable, information and baselines that I can incorporate into my life. Because Juliet and I have different physiologies. She's a woman. I'm a man. Like the same thing. Principles will remain static. Does Juliet need to eat fewer fruits and vegetables than I do? No, right? Those things. But like, I don't process saturated fat very well. And if I go on some keto diet, I get diarrhea, my performance sucks, my cholesterol spikes, my triglycerides are through the roof, and everyone's like, you look like you're dying when you eat all these whole eggs. So one of the things that we know about, because we've tested our genetics, is guess what? I just don't need and process a lot of fat. That's the ding on my performance. So ultimately, what we're hoping we can do is get to the important conversations first. And again, you can be sort of health curious and how you want to get there. But what we have gotten in the bargain with that, where we've gotten a whole bunch of people paying attention. When we take omegas, we take, supplements. We love that stuff. We get our blood panels done regularly, but simultaneously we have left everyone behind. And if you're going to say, I'm a biohacker, then I also want you to say, I am the node of change in my family, and I am the node of change and personal aggregator for my friends and community. Because what's happened is there's a whole cohort of us who've just left everyone else in the dust. And now it's so confusing and people are so overwhelmed that they go back and reach for the bourbon, they reach for the cookie, they reach for the TV, they reach for the THC. They'll reach for anything to self-soothe. They're doing juice cleanses, et cetera, et cetera. All the tropes that are out there. So again, I want to expand the word biohacker. That means that I am an agent for change in my family and community, and that I am testing and bringing better iterations of health and wellness. Because if we don't reach backwards, and if we don't transform what we're learning into actually transforming society, then this is just an elitist sport. Just like we all play polo, and if you don't if you don't have 6 horses, you're nothing. I mean, and that's a little bit, I think, what our proletariat reaction is to this really elite conversations about health and wellness.
Yeah. I mean, if I, just to add, we've done a horrible job, and this is not, I wouldn't pin this on the biohacking community at all. I would pin this on the larger health, fitness, wellness community, that huge umbrella. I mean, we have done a horrible job of making basic health practices accessible and relatable. Like we've done, we get like an F as a community. I mean, again, we've all biohacked our way in our little, vertical of humans. Like we've biohacked our way to maybe durability and longevity, or whatever our ultimate goals are. But I mean, we're in the 1%, 99 or less. 99% of people can't relate. It's not accessible. They can't see how they can fit these practices into their lives. So we're just on a mission to back to basics. How can we make it accessible and relatable?
How do we bring people on the adventure?
Yeah. How do we bring people on board? And, we don't bring people on board by super complicated, super technical things. We have to revert to the basics.
Yeah. And this is the thing that's interesting to me is this is a wild correlation perhaps, but there was an era in cocktail culture, since you're Spicy Margarita crew, where you'd walk into a bar and they would say, my background's in liquor, but you'd walk into a bar and the menu would have all these fancy cocktails, most of the ingredients in there, or some of them in every drink. You'd be like, I don't know what that is. You tell the bartender you want this drink. and you'd be too shy to kind of ask about what was in it. And then it'd take them 10 to 15 minutes to shake you up and make this cocktail that came with all the bells and whistles and a smoking ball of pineapple or whatever. You'd be like, fuck, this is insane and awesome, but also I have no idea what's happening in this experience in the environment. And I don't know if you guys were in that scene at all, just out in the world, but in the beginning, there was a little bit of this like air of don't ask me, or don't like this, like, I don't want to seem stupid. So I'm just going to follow the process that's happening in this bar culture, in this cocktail culture. And when you say, Juliet, like, oh, we get an F, I think what they had thrown out the window in the bar scene was like kindness, hospitality, and taking people on the journey, right? There was like, where did hospitality go? Now you're like a douchey bartender who's like cracking an egg in my drink, but like, I can't even talk to you and you don't even look at me in the eyes. And so I think we're not necessarily being mean, but we're this health and wellness community is sort of like, okay, we're doing the thing that continues to push other people out. And so I love that you're talking about this, because we don't talk about it enough. And because it always feels like, you say to me earlier, Kelly, you're at the bar, you're running away from us at the bar. But the reality is like, I'm not. I'm like ordering another drink, being like, tell me more. But like 20 other people have probably walked away. And those are the 20 people that we want to make change for. So yeah, it seems really, it's highly relevant and very timely that this book is coming out. I want one of you guys to speak a little bit to adherence, because adherence is the challenge. And in many ways, or this consistency, what Mike T. Nelson calls violent consistency, which I really love the term, and all my female clients are like, that's too much for me.
We're big fans. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you up, but we're also big fans of Layne Norton. I think he uses the phrase bone crushing consistency, which I think maybe sort of on the same plane as like violent consistency. So I think we need to find something that's a little softer.
Well, let me take this adherence idea. The pinnacle of my doctoral work was I looked at barriers to adherence. What keeps people from doing what they say they're going to do? And I, wrote this case study, and it was about a woman who had low back pain, and she didn't fit into her life any of the things that we knew would change her back pain, from smoking less to walking more to drinking water to meditating to breath work to mobility, whatever. And I threw a journal in front of her and was like, I just need you to journal your behaviors. It's called a training log. And no one in physical therapy had ever seen that before. And in my school, they're like, this is novel and crazy. And I was like, when you're an athlete, you write down what you did so that you can see inputs and outputs and try to make sense of the chaos that is your life, right? This is why it's important for Juliet and I that we come from high performance environments. It's not where we live, and we don't think they're the most important, but we get really good feedback loops about inputs and outputs, and we get to test our thinking at speed, load, and real stress. So we just know what sticks and what doesn't stick. And ultimately, when we look at adherence now, it's driven all of our thinking, because what I think we've come to is Juliet and I are actually working parents. We have 2 teenage daughters. We have all of the things that come along with trying to be parents and members of our community and volunteers. And we have a business, and we have employees. Like Juliet and I don't get to wake up and go through our gratitude journal and meditate and walk. And that doesn't work for us in our lives. And what I think what that does is the aggregation of those 2 things was that we started to view technology and practice through the lens of, when is someone going to do this? Where are they going to fit into the busy lives? Because one of my early critiques of the biohacking phase, and again, I think I was like one of the first 50 people on Dave Asprey's original podcast. I coined the term disaster pants from drinking too much, MCT oil and coffee. So, but I said to Juliet, I was like, if I hand you this list, Juliet was like, of things you're supposed to do today to optimize your health. Juliet's like, I'll kill you. I'll stab you in the neck, because I'm already maxed out on what I can do. So we started to really look at, where do people have agency in the 24 hours where we could ask them to physically do a behavior. And then we know it is some practice, and we want to get the beginner gains and the early wins. And when people feel better, or we point out that, hey, walked a little bit more and stuck in more movement, and that changed how you fell asleep and stayed asleep, then I don't have to sell that anymore. So first of all, is showing people how they have to integrate these things in a sustainable, holistic, long-term way, so that it's not just a temporary gimmick habit. I'm getting married. I want to drop 20 pounds. I'm not going to eat a carb for the next 3 months. That's not sustainable, but sitting on the ground while you watch TV turns out to be super sustainable. And that's something you can do in the evening when there isn't another demand on your time. So we view everything through that lens of when and where are people going to do this. And then one of the things that's nice about that lens is that it also can be expanded into, well, this technology is super cool. I think Pelotons are fun and amazing, and people cry and they have you get Jess King telling you can be someone. What are we going to do? Put a Peloton, 3 Pelotons in everyone's house? Is that the solution? And so one of the things that we start to view is, does this technology scale? Does this behavior scale? Can it be regressed and progressed? And if I'm working with 30 people, I'm going to need 30 $10,000 machines. I'm already out, right? And so we started to expand adherence into how accessible and democratized are these practices. And you can suddenly see that when, in our business through our app on the website, is we try to make it very affordable and crowdsource the volumes that we can pay our staff and do everything. But we realized that if we could make this so that it was sustainable for people, that it wasn't a splurge they could only spend 1 month a year on, they could integrate in a part of their lives. Again, that adherence idea feeds itself all the way through. And ultimately, it is always about behavior change.
Well, and I would just add for your listeners, Kelly and I are not those kind of health, fitness, wellness people who have hours and hours a day to sauna, walk, journal, meditate, breathe, exercise, do all the things. And I think that that's a perception that people outside of our space have of those of us that are in the space.
That's not true. I was driving home yesterday from Tahoe. You guys are all in the car working, and I just did my breath work while I was driving by myself.
So, but what I want people to understand is we spend, 8 or 10 hours a day on our computers working and on Zoom calls and, doing what is basically what I think most people are doing during their work days. And so what we realize, and what I prefer over the bone crushing consistency, violent consistency concept, is that, we aren't motivated. What we've done is make our environment such that it's impossible for us not to incorporate these healthy habits. Let me give you an example. We have this idea called peppering our environment. When it comes to mobilizing, for example, it's something that's nobody really wants to be doing that, and it's tiring. And, if you have a choice between exercising and mobilizing, everyone's going to choose to exercise, right? But it's we know from the data that everybody's spending 2 or 3 hours a day watching TV. It's done. They're on their phones watching TV. Everybody's doing that regardless of who you are. That's a known thing. And so what we've done is we've peppered our living room with easy ways we can sit on the floor. There's mobility tools everywhere. We have a pair of Normatec boots in our living room. There's lacrosse balls and supernovas. And, we have in our kitchen, we have slack blocks so that while we're cooking and standing around and, socializing, we can all be standing and playing and working on our balance, right? So we really like this idea of peppering our environment so that there's no motivation, there's no choice, there's no determination. It literally is just there. That's one of the reasons why, for some reason, it's just a pet peeve of mine. I hate everyone's just meal prep, do your meal prep. Well, man, I'm as a parent, I spend, half my weekends an hour and a half away from my house, orphaned at a swimming pool while my kids at an all-day water polo tournament. Excuse me, when would I have 4 hours on a Sunday to meal prep for my whole week? No, that's not what my life is like. And that's not what most people's life is like, right? So we've really tried to say, okay, this is how we do it. We are you, and we struggle to fit all these things into our lives. And this is how we do it. And we don't always get an A. We have days where we, don't drink enough water and have coffee all day and never get a chance to move enough. Those days happen to us too. And then we just work to reset. But really, we are trying to say, look, this is hard. It's hard to fit all these things in. But man, if you focus on these 10 basics, it is doable within the context of a busy, crazy life. And, it's something that everybody can do without a total upset.
And let me give you two kind of ideas that strangely conjoin. One is this idea of Carl Rogers, right? That you can reinvent yourself every day. And that one of the things that Juliet and I are talking about is that you have a 24-hour duty cycle. So one of the games we play every day is, can we eat 800 grams of fruits and vegetables? Why? Because we're obsessed with fiber, we're obsessed with micronutrients. And some days we hit it, and guess what? Tomorrow, you get another shot at it. And I think that's what's really important, is that you don't have to get 100% every day, but there are days where you're like, well, I maxed out my movement today, but now I'm on an airplane and I'm going to just choose to get as much movement as I can. I'm going to drink some water and I'm going to call it good. And today I was actually even able to do some exercise that I love. And I was able to. So suddenly what we see is that over time, that is really what's so difficult for humans, is to appreciate that the scale of this game is an infinite game. And that, do you win your health? No. Yesterday I won my marriage. I retired. I'm done. It's all good. You don't get to win these things. So what ends up happening is the day rolls over, you get another shot. And when you start to make those small changes and you're drinking enough water, 6 out of 7 days, things really do change, because the body is so durable. It's so extraordinary. And so we add this idea that you can reinvent yourself every day. And then on top of that, Juliet's absolutely right. Peppering the environment is a way of what we call a nicer way of saying environmental constraint, which is a term I originally learned working with people who had transient ischemic attacks or strokes, things like that, head trauma. And if they had a more impaired side, for example, what they would do is they would actually, in PT, they would put a glove on. This is happening in OT too. And they would wrap an oven mitt around someone's less affected side. So the right hand was less affected, and they would force the left hand or the affected side to do all the work. And that's an idea of environmental constraint. So let me give you a simple environmental constraint idea. If you want people to eat fruit, cut up fruit and vegetables and put it around. If you want people to eat cookies, put cookies around. And what you'll suddenly see is that, wow, I can highly manipulate the environment just by setting myself up for choices where I don't have willpower, or I do have willpower agency. And what Juliet is saying is that you just can't do it all and do it all for decades and decades unless you're some weird monk. But what you can do is put a roller next to the couch. And when you're watching your favorite TV show, you're like, oh, my calves are tight. And you can roll out your calves while you're still on the floor. And that is sustainable.
The goal is to make these basic practices something that you don't even have to think about doing, because you've set up your environment and they've become a habit. So you eliminate motivation, determination. None of that stuff works. You have to eliminate that. It just has to be like one of the habits I have, because as a woman in my 40s, almost 50s, I know I need to eat enough protein.
You still think you're in their 40s?
I'm barely in my 40s anymore. But I know I need to eat enough protein. And one of the habits that I've started in my life, thank you to Stacey Sims, Dr. Stacey Sims, telling me that women need to eat protein within 30 minutes of exercises. I have a scoop of protein mixed with water within 30 minutes of exercise. It's actually not even something I think about anymore. I finish my workout. I put the protein powder in the cup. I chug it down. I'm like, check the box. I've had a little bit of protein with creatine in it every single day after I exercise. And it's not even like it's not even something I think about doing. I literally do it robotically now, because I just have gotten in the habit of doing it every day. So
yeah, you don't make a kale micronutrient chia smoothie. It's not that. It is literally a gump of whey protein into some tepid water.
Yeah, it's not about joy or enjoyment or sitting down to a meal. I just know that I need some hydration and protein after I work out as a woman. And so I just do it every day. But, it took a little while to have that be a consistent habit in my life. So it takes some time and it takes some failure.
Yeah. And also, I love that I love Stacey. I've done her course. Just her work has been really pivotal in me understanding and how I work with women.
Us too.
Yeah, me too.
And the protein thing is real. And I love that you just use that as an example, because I was going to this smoked oyster fest thing with my mom after Thanksgiving, but hadn't gotten my protein in, and I was like, My mom doesn't even have the blender out. And like, what am I? And I'm like, I have my packet of to-go protein and I have my XPT water bottle. And this happens a lot when I'm on the road. It's like, just make your chocolate water and go. Like it's no ice, no nothing, no blender. Like we had 2 minutes to leave. I just gotten dressed from coming back from training. And I'm like, okay, this is all I get. And I'm not sad about it because I know that when I go to this like oyster fest, I'll eat oysters like crazy, but that everything else on the tables will be cookies and cakes. Again, I'm not about being restrictive. If I love it and I think it's worth it, I might go for it. But I also know that it's like that velvet cake is not a good source of protein. So I love this point. It's super imperative. I think it doesn't always have to feel like sexy or like the most flavorful. I'm not like, find a protein powder you can handle with just water. And that's how I judge my protein powder choices, is by saying what mixes well when I'm in a shit storm and I have a shaker and I'm in like a hotel where it's bathroom sink water and that protein. Not that that's what I want, but like that's
yeah, obviously like a, perfectly prepared piece of, meat and vegetables. Like obviously that is the gold standard, right? The gold standard is food. But that's not how our lives work. And definitely not the lives of people who don't identify as like athletes or health.
You two gym bros, take it down a notch, okay? So keep in mind that one of the things that you're both talking about is saying, I have a benchmark behavior that I'm trying to hit every day. Does everyone understand that 7 hours of sleep or less is really based? Everyone knows that on the planet, right? You should get 8 hours of sleep. That's our dream for everyone. Everyone knows that. Well, all you've done is expand that idea into saying, well, how much protein should I, based on my size and as my physiology? And then you're free to solve that problem any way you want. You two meatheads have figured out that if you preloaded your protein, then it was easier for the rest of the day to hit that minimum sort of requirement. And when you start to sort of enlarge that way of thinking, suddenly you're like, okay, have I put my joints through their normative ranges today? Have I walked and loaded today? Have I slept today? And that's what we haven't done, is given people real benchmarks of saying above and below. What is normative blood pressure? 120/80. Is that good blood pressure? No. But it's a benchmark for people to say, oh, I should pay attention to this or make a change. And if we can get the volume and pressure of your veins and arteries to matter to people, we can also do that around getting enough protein.
Well, and just to like this whole, he's talking about like a vital sign. I mean, we called each one of the chapters in our book as a vital sign, because we really want people to rethink like your vital signs. It's great that your blood pressure, whatever, that's sort of like not helpful to you as a human. We want people to have like, these are the vital signs. And most of the vital signs are centered around movement, because that's the one that we think is really missing. I mean, again, we've included all these lifestyle behaviors in our book because we had to back into those behaviors. But really at the core, what we want to be able to do and continue to do as humans is move. And that's what we think is not talked about. And movement is a vital sign. We've got to be able to move through our environment, and our body needs to be able to move up and down and in position.
You got to decongest.
Yeah. So
I like what you're thinking though. I mean, let me tell an anecdotal story that we had a baby where it's a holiday. We're visiting Juliet's mother. We're going to some party, and what do they serve at every holiday party? Cheese plate. And I was like, over my dead body, am I going to eat 3,000 calories of cheese for dinner? I just don't want that dinner. It's delicious. So we're standing in the elevator, and Juliet's like, what is wrong with your face? And I'm like, what are you talking about? And I had stuffed all this pork loin into my mouth, so to try to get my grams in, because I knew I was going to be stuck and be like, here I am at a party, and what's there? Delicious cheese. And all the bread that goes with the cheese and the crackers. And so I'm holding a bag, and I've just got this mouthful of pork. And Juliet's like, oh, those are pork cheeks. So I have become pork cheeks to my family for many, over a decade now. And my point is that, when you start to say, people I think are clever enough to solve the problem if they know what the problem is first. And then even getting close to getting some more protein changes a whole bunch of other behaviors. And I think that's what's so remarkable about when we start to think about our health and wellness as a system of systems. One of the things we know is that protein is high satiety, that if you eat a lot of protein, you feel full. And guess what happens when you feel full? You don't binge on half a cake. I know that from personal experience. So, my daughter Georgia has a subscription bakery, and she mails out cookies all over the United States. And we will regularly have 300 to 400 cookies in our house on the table. And what I have to do is
it's hard
is make sure I hit all my protein goals, because then I'm like, I don't really want the cookie. But if I come home hungry and I'm not paying attention, then I will default to wanting to eat 300 cookies. And trust me, at 235 pounds, and I can, in a lot of muscle mass, I can put a lot of cookies away. It is my secret ninja skill. If I was an Avenger, I'd be the cookie Avenger.
But this is making a really important point too, which is just like accessibility and what's around the house. And you talked a little bit about peppering the house with tools. And I think there is a level of overwhelm that it seems to me you are trying to dispel in the book. That is like, how do we do this one brick at a time? And how do we just get acquainted autonomously, like taking responsibility to say, okay, like I can't learn everything this month, but maybe this month I can understand like what protein do I, and like food tracking, right? That's a challenge for people sometimes, but it's like, maybe I can take in some protein and track food for 3 or 4 days and kind of see what in the heck I'm eating when it comes to macronutrients. I think it's far too often people are like, oh, I got to download an app and then do it for 6 months, and just knowing the basics. And maybe that's what you take on for 1 month. And as I get my hands on your book, and everyone else does, because I think now we can only pre-order it, right? We still can't get our hands on it.
Still just pre-order it.
April 4th.
Yeah.
But what you're bringing up is we've seen the people who've read the book, right, have tended not to be in our demographic of exerciser, sort of health fitness people. And what's been interesting and good feedback for us is that people are like, wow, this really just changed how I started to view the behaviors. And just sort of reading the book or holding the book or skimming the book is enough to begin to just change how you're solving some of these problems. And it happens organically. And so for us, for example, we have a chapter called Eat Like You're Gonna Live Forever. And trust us, we know that nutrition is the third rail, and that we don't want to anger the carnivore people or anger the intermittent fasting people. And so we're like, oh, you're vegan? Super cool. Here's as many grams of protein that you should get in a day. Here's your fruits and vegetables. Do you think that that's reasonable? Because that's what everyone on the planet is saying. And, around minimums. And it turns out we become very agnostic about how you want to solve that. You want to do that with blackberries and ribeye, and that's your jam. You go for it, and you can still hit that goal. A pound of cherries is 230 calories. You're over halfway to what we want. And you spent 230 calories for almost 400 grams of fruits and vegetables, not carbohydrate, fruits and vegetables. But simultaneously, one of the things that I found out is that we saw a lot of people in our neighborhood, middle-aged men particularly, who discovered intermittent fasting or time-restricted eating as a mechanism for calorie control. And Juliet and I were like, great, you guys are eating too many calories. That's fantastic. What a great solution. But it turns out you're not eating any fruits and vegetables or getting enough protein. So you're losing all your lean muscle mass and you're not, keeping the fire stoked. And when we were saying, hey, if you want to do this, super cool, also be responsible for your blood pressure, vital sign, but in protein, turns out it's really difficult to get your protein grams for most people if you skip big chunks of meals, right? And if you don't eat until 1 o'clock, it's really cool because you didn't eat a bunch of calories and bagels, but also you're way behind. And what we found is that a lot of the men in our neighborhood weren't eating enough to actually support exercise, sleep, soft tissues, because they'd made a choice around a certain behavior. So again, what's nice is that we feel like you can fit in your special identity and your unique eating style and the way you like to eat. Just keep it in the guidelines and show us your creativity.
I will say the other thing that's often not considered in our community is people's cultural preferences in eating. I think that is a huge piece. People aren't going to like, okay, I'm not from X culture and I'm going to completely switch how I approach eating. And I think that's something we try to address. Again, it's like every single culture on earth, going back into ancient history, eats some form of protein and some form of fruits and vegetables. Like, and please don't call me about like the Messiah just drinking blood or whatever. Like, okay, extreme exception there.
Protein drink.
But still a protein. So
the original protein drink.
Again, I think what we're trying to say here is that our goal has been to try to democratize, make accessible, relatable, basic health practices. Like that is the goal here. And if, out of the 10 vital signs, the people who read this book pick up 3 or 4 or 5 or 7, like great, like already that's a huge like sea change in behavior.
Yeah.
Really.
I love how you're like open sourcing it for people. It's really nice. And also the ease of being able to pick up a book to start, because I think then people feel like that's more approachable, right? Like I put the kids to bed, I can read a chapter and go, okay, how can I align with this? Is my partner aligned? Which I know you have something to say, Kelly, but I also want to talk briefly about the fact that you're talked a lot about the family unit and in partnership. And you're like, power couple, health and wellness. What do we do about people who are like, hey, I want to make these changes, and they're making changes small, bit by bit every day, and also they aren't in alignment with either their culture or their community or their families? Like that can be a challenge, right? I think that comes up a lot with people that I'm working with, where they're like, my partner isn't on board and I'm training for a triathlon. And I also have people I've worked with that have said, it's over, baby, I'm moving on because this doesn't align with my lifestyle. But that's not always the case. And I think that there is, do you see cases, or do you think that there is some carryover in that piece of, I just kept writing down like teamwork, togetherness, community, that whole peppering the house with stuff. If your partner keeps tripping over your balance beam, and they're like, okay, what's happening, So
let me take a swing.
Okay.
My wife is such a skeptic. When I first, 2003, it was like, there's this thing called the paleo diet. Joe's like, oh, really? She's like, so she Googles it. It's 2003. This is the dark ages of everything, right? I mean, let me just say that
Google was there, but it
barely. It was barely.
Yahoo was there.
She probably asked Jeeves.
That's right.
Yeah.
You couldn't buy a kettlebell in the city of San Francisco in 2003. That's where we were. One of my coaches, you can buy bumper plates at Walmart now. That's how the world has changed. So Juliet Googles like paleo, and she's like, oh, fermented hornets or wasp nest soup. She's like, I just don't think this is a thing. And I was like, maybe it's just about food quality. And she's like, okay, I can wrap my head around that. So keep in mind that, first of all, that my wife is very skeptical. And I have run some really dumb experiments in our life where I'm like, this family will drink goat milk. And then I'm retching over the sink, and there's a bunch of bad things that have happened as we have sorted this out and tried these things about, ask me about my first forays.
But Sisson, that you were like, you're like, who gave you the initial bug on paleo?
I mean, I think it was just part and parcel of being involved in the early CrossFit community.
Yeah.
That was it. I think that was
we knew who Lauren Cordain
and
was.
Rob Wolf.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, there was a time where I was like, hey, I think this heart rate variability is really important. So I have an Omega Wave, one of the earliest devices, and I'm putting a tab on my head and on my forearm, and I have to lay down. And meanwhile, our children have to go to preschool.
Let me just give some context here. Our kids are like 3 and 5, because that's how long ago it was. They're like little kids. And, whatever. So Kelly, and I have to give even more context. Kelly has to get up, and then he has to wait like 15 minutes. And then after he gets up, he has to go back and lay down for another 15 or 20 minutes and like add all these like nodes to his body, and then like collect all this data. And I was like, hold on a second. Like, under no circumstances am I going to be out here dressing, tying the shoes, making lunches, making breakfast, running around like, what moms do in the morning, doing what moms do by myself while you're laying in there trying to collect your heart rate.
Stop talking. You're
like no way, like that is not going to work, right?
So one of the things that we do together is we won't pick up a new sport or activity without the other person, and that we really try to invite the other person along and leave room for that. And because then we're on the mission together, right? And we're going to do some challenges around this book. Just little week-long experiments. And the first experiment for our people is going to be very hard, which is walking 10,000 steps a day, in addition to whatever you're doing. But for a lot of people, we know the data supports that people are getting 2,000 to 4,000 steps a day. They're just not moving enough. And so what we've done with our first week-long challenge is actually we're trying to get all of our super friends to become nodes for the community. So the thing you brought up was, how do I engage with my family or my partners on these long sustainable health things? It doesn't feel like I'm nagging. It's another thing that I have to do, because that's real, right? Especially when someone is very curious, like, why are you eating that, Kelly? Why are you drinking that? I don't know, but Laird said it was good for me, so I'm drinking.
It's a weird one. Yeah, when this is what happens to us all the time, is we have to be confident enough to be like, I'm the weird one at Thanksgiving having my weird protein shake before. I'm the weird one that's just doing a different behavior.
It's really difficult.
Yeah.
It's difficult.
Yeah.
So this first challenge is a walking challenge, but it's designed for someone to give to someone else, to invite their family along, to invite their uncle along, or their grandma, or their partner, or their neighbor, to say, come along with us. I think that here's a health revolution that you can engage with, and I'll do it with you. And the barrier to entry is very small. And I think, the problem with modern people is that we want it all. We want the big heavy duty challenge. I want to be able to talk about it on social media, right? And the things that we know make real changes in people's lives are not very sexy. They're done over the course of decades and decades. They're very sustainable. And, one of the things that we have seen as a case study is that Juliet and I have been doing this for as long as we can. And Juliet has jacked arms, right? And a lot of the women in our schools, are like, Juliet, they're like, how do I get arms like yours? And Juliet's like, it's very simple. When I was 12 years old, I started rowing and I started lifting weights. And then I went to college and I've been lifting weights. And I've been lifting weights so long that I have these arms. And then they were like, well, I don't want to get big and bulky. And Juliet's like, well, if you didn't start lifting weights when you were 12, chances are you're not going to get big. But people can't appreciate that this is not overnight, and that you don't just arrive here one day with shredded abs in the kitchen. That doesn't happen on Instagram. And what we want people to see is that, look, it's really about these small adventures with your family. That is the functional unit of change, and that rinse, wash, repeat. And once we start to give people those guidelines, we have seen time and time again that people feel better and they can see it for themselves. And now we don't have to, as Juliet said, summon that iron will to resist the ice cream. That's never going to work. We are hardwired to lay on the couch. We're hardwired to eat the snack. We're hardwired to hit the serotonin. I mean, those things are always going to win because that's part of our structure.
Yeah. I do think too that, people might need to work really hard to find common ground with their loved ones and friends. I think the data is pretty clear that we are such communal species that we do what people in our community do. So if we happened to be lucky enough to land in a community of people who care about their health and wellness and fitness, then we are going to care about our health, wellness, and fitness. And if we happen to land in a community of people who want to, get wasted every weekend night, that's the people we hang out with. And so, I guess I would, people aren't going to drop their friends because they realize, oh my God, I'm friends with only people who just want to drink all the time and not friends with people who want to move. But I guess I would challenge people to think of it as an expansion versus a cutoff, right? Expand your community to include the people who want to do the things that you want to do. And, if that's just meeting up with your friends for a walk every day or, on the weekend or, whatever it is. And then sort of within couples, I would say the same thing, expand your idea of what's possible. I think what's challenging in a couple and family environment, and you gave the triathlon example, which I think may be the worst one, because there's probably more triathlons and marathons have probably broken up marriages. Because the amount of an intensity of training that has to go on and sort of how self-centered it has to be able to be successful in those sports. I think those are real, those can be those particular sports can be real challenges, when only one person is doing them. But I think that I think everybody feels better and likes to move and, do move their body in some way. And I think the goal would be to find common ground with your family and loved ones about what you actually like to do. Skiing we love to ski as a family. And what I will say as a caveat is like skiing is the dumbest sport. It's so expensive and time consuming. And I mean, it's really ridiculous, but we both grew up doing it. So it makes sense to us. And, one of the things we love about skiing now is that it's like one of the few sports that all four of us and, all four kids and adults alike can do together. And so for me at this point, like I love skiing down the hill and going fast or whatever, but what I love more about skiing is actually just sitting on the chairlift with my kids and having like uninterrupted time to talk to them. And so that's what I think, people should seek out is those things that maybe aren't what you might choose to do on your own because it's what you're passionate about, but like there's something out there that you can do with your spouse or with your kids or something, even if it's just walking.
If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go with friends. I mean, that is such an old, maxim. And biohacking and counting your pills, you'll go fast initially, but you really have to expand it into what Julia's saying is play, as cultural play. Our friends just got back from Vietnam and they noticed that at 6 a.m, everyone sets up before work and is playing badminton and is outside doing Tai Chi and messing around in the streets. And then like literally everyone then at 7, everything's away and everyone's at, the storefronts are open. And when we forget, because this is a strength conditioning fault, we have sucked the joy out of moving. We have made it so that moving has to be
like a chore,
this intensity and this chore, and you have to do these things. And here's your corrective exercise. And corrective exercise alone, makes me feel like I want to watch TV and eat bonbons. So, the idea is, Juliet and I feel strongly you should be able to pick something heavy off the ground. You should carry it around. You should be able to, but really we now are just like, well, what is it you like to do? Let's start that. Let's do that a lot. I got into a fight with a woman who was the small group fitness coordinator for a huge Canadian fitness chain called Good Life. And I was like, Zumba isn't fitness. And she was like, whoa. And I was like, hold up. No range of motion, right? I was like, there's no loading. I just went on and on and on, right? And I was like, but I've never seen someone not go to a Zumba class and smile. I've never seen not someone sweat and have fun, not mirror and feel I'm like, it's a entertainment that has benefits. It's a cultural phenomenon, but stop selling it as fitness. That's the wrong sell. Come learn to dance and have a good time with your friends, but don't say you're going to go to Zumba to get shredded. That's the thing that kills me when we're stripping out why things are good in the first place, right? So, go throw a Frisbee in your neighborhood.
I say women because it's like 99% women or 90% women. Even though it started by a man. And the irony is I opened a studio in New Hampshire for 2 years and it was boutique fitness and really heavily driven by Zumba. And women get out. It was like the one way they got out. And
one way they got out.
Yeah.
I'm like, you need to go back to Zumba more often. And also here's a kettlebell.
Yeah. And also here's a kettlebell. Yeah. And just as a little tail onto the play piece, my partner always likes to like postprandial walk, and he's very adamant about 10,000 steps. And if I didn't have him, I wouldn't hit 10,000 every day. And so, but there's moments like to suggest to people. One weekend I was like, I'm just not. Two things. I'll take a crutch sometimes, meaning I take a can of sparkling water. Tactilely feels like maybe a beverage or a beer or something, like no calories, no nothing. And I will walk with the sparkling water. And for somehow it makes me feel like it's a stroll or it's something else. It's like cheating the system to make me feel like when I don't want to go, I get to crack my sparkling water and walk with it. And then one Saturday I was like, we can go train. I'm just going to go walk. And we found like a trampoline park not too far away. And we went and it was like,
so fun.
The best, not just steps, but resistance training. And we're the only adults in there jumping on the trampolines. And that's the thing I want to encourage people is like, you don't have to go as hard as your kids because those parks can be wild, but you still have opportunities to find playful things to do, which I love that conversation.
And if I could just add to that too, like speaking of peppering our environment, like, we have bongo boards and like in our garage, we have Frisbees and, mitts with balls. And I mean, we were just, out of town for the weekend, and in like a single weekend, we skied through the Frisbee, through the softball with the mitts. We all balanced on the bongo board. We lifted weights together. And that was all. We went for a big hike, and that was all like very easy to do because it was just all the stuff was just like sitting there, like every time we'd walk out to go out to the car, someone in the family would stop at the bongo board and like get on the bongo board for like, a minute and then go get in the car to go out to dinner or whatever. Right. So we just have all this playful, like that's, I think, the other thing that's been lost. And Kelly, to Kelly's point, is that like, man, this play piece and the fun is such an important part of all of this. And, we've lost it in the sort of like, you must do all these things at this time in this way.
It's not micronutrients. It's sitting down and feeding your family, And again, one of the things that I want everyone to hear is that we're not saying you should do these things because you'll die if you don't and you'll live a small, miserable life. We're saying that if you do these things, you will be able to do more things. You'll feel better. You'll be more lucid. You'll have more energy in the evening with your kids. You'll be stoked to move on the weekends. I don't think, Juliet and I are always aiming at, as I said, we have 2 objective measures. Can you do what your body's supposed to be able to do? And does it improve your wattage and poundage and output? And I don't think people realize that we are so geared at opening up the floodgates of performance, but that performance is, wow, I felt great. I didn't need a coffee at 4:00 to get through the day. I didn't have to have a glass of wine because I'm so stressed out and I feel like crap. And that's the only tool I have available to me. And when you do these things, you'll see that you can play more and feel better. And that really is just the hallmark of what we're trying to accomplish here, is saying, hey, look, if these things start to come into your lives, whatever those things are, when you're sustainable, it's 1 or 0. Do I feel better? Can I have more fun with my friends and family? And it turns out cooking is one of those things. And when we again, thinking about one of the advantages that we see in all high performance groups is that they eat together. High performance groups share a meal regularly together once a week. Some of the really high performance groups eat 2 or 3 meals together a day, right? But they actually sit down and eat together. I'm talking about like SEAL Team 6. I'm talking about like Delta Force. I'm talking about a lot of the C-suite people have lunch together, and it's not a business lunch. They just sit down and eat. So there is something there about, first principles. And when you then apply that lesson of fun and play, all our kids like to cook. And we've been working on that for a long time. Our daughter, Georgia, is a really great cook. She's almost 18 years old. It's taken us 18 years to give her the skill set where she'll make us dinner, and she's like, no, I want to cook today. I want to make soup or whatever it is. And the idea is when we all sit down, we're not thinking about grams and we're not thinking about micronutrients and fiber. We're thinking about play together, being human. We want to take all of the crap off the table so you can go be human.
Yeah, which is amazing. I have a couple more questions and then I'll let you go because I know you've been so gracious with your time and my technology today. The next question is really directed at you, Juliet, and I want to say it in a way that will be contextually, hopefully not canceling me, which is, what are women doing wrong? What are women doing wrong? If we have to, in the help.
Nothing.
Yeah. Well, I would say,
I'm gonna, before you answer, I'm going to say your husband is pretty. You've trained him well. I want to congratulate you.
We like to say
it's been a lot of work. It's been
a lot of work.
like a well-trained dog.
Because
you don't need a leash.
Here's what I'd say, and I imagine this differs in every community, but here I'll speak to what I see in my own community, and that is that the women I see that are in their 40s and 50s are sadly still obsessed with being skinny. Even if it's not said out loud, and even if we have started to shift our sort of cultural mindset around like, more body awareness and body acceptance. In fact, I think my daughters who are teenagers, I think their generation actually is going to hopefully fare better than ours in terms of, different body types and body acceptance and, appreciating a muscular body or whatever that may be. But at least in my generation, which I could say is like 40s and 50s women, I think the focus still is often on being skinny. And so what I see the behaviors around that is still excessive cardio. And the idea that if you want to stay skinny, you need to do an excessive amount of cardio. Definitely not eating remotely enough protein. Like I bet if I took a poll of like all the mom friends that I'm friends with, I bet they're eating 25% of the amount of protein they should probably be eating at their age, especially as, perimenopausal, menopausal women. Too much wine drinking. I hate to say that because it's like, I feel sad that I'm that person. And it's hard not to come across as judgmental, but definitely too much, both, I think what I see a lot is that, too many women in our age range, both find most of their fun, around drinking and do most of their stress relief around drinking. So those are things that I think, and again, we're not anti-alcohol actually, but what we've done in our own life that has worked well for us. And again, I want to give wide latitude to people to do what they think works well, but what has worked for us is framing drinking in the context of a celebration. And nobody has a birthday party or a celebratory event 7 nights a week, and every single weeknight. So we really save our drinking for what we would really consider to be a celebration. If like we haven't seen some friends in a really long time, or if we obviously go to a wedding or, like a big event, then we not always, and not in every case, we just had Thanksgiving and I didn't feel like having any alcohol. So I had no alcohol, but that's actually worked well for us, in terms of how to limit our alcohol consumption. But yeah, I think those are the biggest things. I think, too much cardio, obsession with being skinny, not enough protein, too much alcohol. I think I repeated myself. And then I think, men and women in this same thing, age demographic are really still, because of, I think, this underlying desire to be skinny, are really not, loading enough. I think that they're trading running and cardio and Pelotoning, for or they should be trading it for some amount of lifting, loading, weight training, whatever that means. And I think, unfortunately, many of them would achieve the body composition they're actually looking for if they shifted that mindset a little bit. But man, like the sort of 80s and 90s crush of media about being skinny it's in there. It is in there and it's deep. So, Kelly tells the story actually about how people are like, how do I get armed like Juliet? My experience is actually the opposite. I find that when I tell women that they should lift more, that my body type is actually a deterrent to them. That they're like, oh, like, I don't want to have those. Like they actually are like, I don't want to have those. Like if I do what you're saying, I'm going to end up with those muscular arms. And again, I would challenge them like, no, you're not. It's too late for that. Like you can't. But I think that, man, that underlying body composition, desire to be thin, and fit into some, social construct is really pervasive. So, I think that's sort of my short list of what women are doing wrong, at least in my community, in my age demographic.
Yeah. I would love to see you run a challenge where it's like a 4-month phase program training cardio versus, or what we were doing before versus a basic phase training for women, 4 months, and then having people compare how to think of this thing.
It would be significant. Yeah.
Patient with their own bodies and lives.
Yeah.
Super beautiful. So women who are listening, you heard this here. We talk about this a lot with various different people on the podcast, and hopefully the last page of your book, there's like a ... and it says, and lift heavy weights.
It does actually. Yeah, it's really funny. We actually, not to overshare, but we actually specifically don't have a main chapter on exercise because we did not want this to be an exercise book or be categorized as an exercise book. We're not writing an exercise book, but we, of course, given that we love exercising, we could not have a sort of afterward, about it. So yeah, people can read about our thoughts there.
I'm so excited to read the book. I will close with my last question, which I ask my guests, which is, you have children, so this may also be a little easier for you. For those, some of my guests don't. It's really, I guess, if you could speak to your younger self or your children at, this perfect like 18-year-old age, or somebody who's a listener, and give yourself something. The name of the podcast is Well Power. It's like powering your wellness. Give yourself one assignment that you knew you would just do as you were from that age of 18 to now that will really make you more powerfully well across the board. If you had to pick one thing.
Watch this. Juliet and I are going to play a game. We're going to do it on 3. 1, 2, 3,
Sleep.
Right.
People have no
Yeah.
idea
That's
how important it is.
And it's, you know, I mean, Jill Miller, I think I learned this from Jill Miller, but like sleep is like the one habit you can do that's like really free. I mean, it, you know, as long as you leave yourself enough time to actually do it for long enough, you know, hopefully it becomes an easy habit, a life habit for people. But yeah, for us, it's sleep. I mean, we obsessively, like, you know, when our kids were little, actually, you know, we didn't leave it to chance. Like, we're like, sleeping is a skill that we need to teach our kids how to do, and prioritize. And we actually laughed when our kids were toddlers, because people would always say to us, like, wow, I mean, your kids are like so well behaved and they're so nice and they don't have tantrums in the grocery store and stuff. And Kelly and I literally would like laugh to ourselves, because we're like, we're probably actually getting an F in like every part of parenting. Like, literally, like, who knows what, you know, we're so weird. Like, there's probably 1,000 ways that we've traumatized our children that they can reevaluate in their 20s in therapy. But like, one thing we got right was teaching our kids how to sleep. And man, like, we would laugh when people would comment on how well behaved our kids were, because we're like, it has nothing to do with us. Like, the only thing we did there was make sure our kids got enough sleep, period. And like,
and
at the right time, we prioritized it. Like, we were all about sleep when our kids were little. And
we still are. We still hammer them. And they are little night owls, but, you know, like, we really hammer the sleep. And our school in California, you know, our kids can sleep until 7, 10 every day, which is pretty remarkable to get enough.
Yeah, like, they don't actually start school till 8:45.
If they go to bed at 11 from homework, or they're just happen to be up. I mean, our kids we're trying to get them between 10:30 is really the magic. And if you have a 17-year-old kid, just find out if they go to bed at 10:30. I think they'll be shocked. But then we were like, that's 8 hours. We got our 8 hours. Like, we're doing our best.
Like, I'm baking. I got 4 more recipes.
Yeah, but you know what I'll say is that Juliet's like secret, like, sexy phrase to me is, you want to do some magnesium and go to bed in the 9s. I'm like, oh, it's so hot.
Yeah.
And you know, for us, what we realized is that really 9 hours of sleep, 9 hours plus in the bed, is magic for us. We need that much time. And you know, one of the things that has really continues to be a theme is, the bigger the engine, the bigger the brakes. You have to be able to hit the brakes. And that's why, man, if you can get hot, if you can get cold, those are big brakes, but sleep is the biggest brake. And if you want to work harder and work out harder, or change your body composition, or be more successful, or have clearer skin, you have to sleep. And people don't realize that, what a superpower that is.
Yeah. And I would just say, in case you have any listeners who are like, oh, well, I can't do that because I travel for work or whatever. So do we. And again, it's back to this topic we were talking about earlier, where it's, again, like, sleep is another thing you can't win. You know, we end up having to travel, and there are plenty of nights where we get crap, not enough sleep. And then we just, you know, we try to get back on the next day. So, I mean, again, we live in a modern world with the constraints of, you know, being busy people who have to travel for work, and, you know, often can't always be in our perfect environment.
Don't worry about it.
But we, you know, so we don't worry about it, but when we can get enough sleep, man, we do.
Yeah. Yeah. Sage advice. This whole episode has been filled with sage advice, and I'm so excited for the book to come out. I've been trying to beg, borrow, steal, write all your friends, write your team, and say, give me the damn book already in digital, and no one will.
When we get it, you will get it.
So for everyone here listening to, just as a closer, just let them know the basics on where they can find you and the details about the launch date of the book.
Sure. Built to Move is coming out on April 4th, 2023, and it's available at any book retailer for pre-order that you care to shop at. And you can also find us at The Ready State on all the social media platforms, and thereadystate.com on the internet. And you can check out our app. It's called Virtual Mobility Coach.
Amazing. I'm in awe of you too, both the togetherness and the community that you create, and the way that you show up so approachably. So nice to have this conversation with people who feel they have reasonable solutions to challenging problems.
Whew, it's hard, but thank you so much for having us. I'm sure we could chat on for another 2 hours. So what a great conversation.
That's beautiful. Down the road in 2023, I'll steal you back, and we'll just talk all about the rest of the women's stuff that's going on in the world.
And just for your listeners,
Anytime.
I will say that we met first at John Wellborn's and then got to hang out at the Bulletproof, not formally Bulletproof, but the Biohacking Conference. And one of the reasons I go is every once in a while I meet a long lost family member, and certainly running into you felt like running into, a lost sister. So we're so glad to have met you.
Yeah, that's so sweet. Yeah, it was nice to be able to high five when I came over to you and said, they want me to be on this whole television channel coaching in a bikini. And I said, I'm not doing that. And they're deciding if they're going to let me do it or not. And you were like, don't listen to those people. You don't coach in a bikini. And I was like, oh, this is a brother. So, yeah. It's just a thing. I appreciate you. I'm sending you my love, and have a wonderful holiday season. And we'll speak soon, I'm sure.
Thank you again.
Thank you.